Jericho Pierce had seen wounded animals before, but never one with tears streaming down her green-skinned face while she pressed herself against the wall of his barn like she expected him to draw the knife at his belt and finish what someone else had started. The orc girl could not have been more than 20 summers old, and she trembled so violently that the tattered remains of her leather armor rattled with each shuddering breath. Blood seeped from a gash across her shoulder, and her right leg buckled every time she tried to shift her weight. Her tusks were small and delicate, barely protruding past her lower lip, and her dark hair hung in matted tangles around pointed ears that lay flat against her skull in pure terror. When Jericho took a single step forward with his hands raised in what he hoped was a calming gesture, she flinched so hard she nearly collapsed. "Easy now," he said quietly, keeping his voice low and steady the way he did with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you." She made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a snarl, her amber eyes darting from his face to the knife at his belt and back again. Her own weapon, a crude axe, lay several feet away where she had apparently dropped it, too injured to even defend herself properly. Jericho could see the desperation in every line of her body, the way she tried to make herself smaller despite her natural strength, the way her hands shook as she held them up in a warding gesture. "Please," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the single word. "Please just make it quick." The request hit Jericho like a fist to the gut. She was not asking for mercy or help. She was asking for a swift death, because that was all she expected from a human who found her bleeding and vulnerable on his property. He thought of the war that had raged 5 years ago between the human settlements and the orc clans to the north. Thought of the propaganda that had painted every orc as a mindless savage bent on destruction. He thought of his own father who had died in that war, and how easy it would be to let old hatred guide his hand. Instead, he very slowly unbuckled his belt and let it fall to the ground, knife and all, then kicked it away. "I am not going to kill you," he said firmly. "You are hurt and it is getting dark and the wolves will be out soon. Let me help you." She stared at him like he had just spoken in a language she could not comprehend. "Why?" "Because you need help," he answered simply. "Can you walk?" The orc girl tried to take a step and immediately crumpled. Jericho moved forward on instinct, catching her before she hit the ground. She went rigid in his arms, every muscle tensed for a blow that did not come. Up close, he could see more injuries, bruises mottling the green skin of her arms, cuts that looked like they came from thorns or branches, evidence of a desperate flight through the forest. She weighed more than a human woman her size would, all dense muscle and solid bone, but he managed to lift her without too much difficulty. "My name is Jericho," he told her as he carried her toward his small cabin. "Jericho Pierce. What do I call you?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Henna. Henna Voss." The cabin was not much, just 2 rooms that Jericho had built himself after mustering out of the army. One room served as kitchen and living space, the other as his bedroom. He carried Henna straight to the bedroom and laid her carefully on his only bed, a simple frame with a straw-stuffed mattress and wool blankets. She looked around with wide, disbelieving eyes, her whole body still trembling. "Stay there," Jericho instructed. "I need to get water and bandages." He half expected her to bolt the moment he left the room, but when he returned with his medical supplies and a bucket of water from the well, she was still there, staring at the ceiling with an expression of numb shock. Jericho had learned field medicine during his years as a soldier, enough to treat basic wounds and set simple breaks. He worked carefully, cleaning the gash on her shoulder first. Henna hissed in pain but did not pull away. "This is deep," he said. "It needs stitches." "I have a needle and thread, but it will hurt." Just do it, she replied through gritted teeth. He did, working as quickly and efficiently as he could while she gripped the blanket so hard her knuckles turned pale. To her credit, she did not cry out, though tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. When he finished with her shoulder and moved to examine her leg, he found a badly sprained ankle, already swollen to twice its normal size. He wrapped it tightly and propped it up on a folded blanket. "You need to stay off that for at least a week," he told her. "Maybe longer." Henna shook her head weakly. "I cannot. I have to keep moving. They are looking for me." "Who is looking for you?" She closed her eyes. "Everyone." Jericho did not press for more details. Instead, he stood and headed for the door. "Rest. I will make some food." "Wait." Her voice stopped him. "Where will you sleep?" He glanced back at her. "The floor will do fine. I have slept on worse." Before she could protest, he left the room and closed the door behind him. In the kitchen area, he busied himself with preparing a simple stew from vegetables and dried meat, giving Henna time to process everything. His mind churned with questions he knew better than to ask yet. What had happened to her? Why was she running? Who had hurt her badly enough that she expected every human to be her executioner? When the stew was ready, he brought her a bowl and helped her sit up enough to eat. She devoured the food with the desperation of someone who had not eaten in days, barely pausing to breathe between bites. He brought her a second helping, then a third, until finally she slowed and the bowl trembled in her hands from exhaustion rather than hunger. "Sleep," Jericho said gently, taking the bowl from her. "You are safe here." Henna's eyes were already drooping. "Why are you doing this?" She asked again, her words slurring with fatigue. "Because it is the right thing to do," he replied. She was asleep before he finished pulling the blanket up over her. Jericho stood there for a moment, looking down at her peaceful face, so young and vulnerable without fear twisting her features. Then he gathered some extra blankets, spread them on the floor of the main room near the fireplace, and settled down for the night. The floor was hard and cold, even with the blankets, and sleep came slowly. Every time Jericho closed his eyes, he saw Henna's face when she had begged him to make it quick, the absolute certainty in her voice that death was inevitable. What kind of life had she lived where human kindness was so foreign that it confused her more than cruelty would have? The thought kept him awake long into the night. He woke to the sound of movement from the bedroom. Dawn light filtered through the windows, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. Jericho sat up, his back protesting after a night on the hard floor, and listened. There was a thump, a muffled curse, then the distinctive sound of someone trying very hard to move quietly despite being injured. He rose and pushed open the bedroom door to find Henna attempting to stand, putting all her weight on her good leg while she used the wall for support. She froze when she saw him, guilt and shame warring across her face. She started, then stopped, unable to come up with a plausible excuse. "Trying to leave before I woke up so you would not have to face me," Jericho supplied, raising an eyebrow. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I have imposed enough. You have been here one night and you can barely stand. Sit back down before you fall down." For a moment he thought she might argue, stubborn pride stiffening her spine. Then her injured leg buckled again, and he had to rush forward to catch her. This time she did not go rigid at his touch, though wariness still clouded her eyes. He helped her back to the bed and she sank onto it with a frustrated growl. "I cannot just stay here," she said. "You do not understand. If they find me here, they will burn your home and kill you for harboring me." "Who will?" Henna looked away. "The human patrols. The ones who guard the border. I crossed into human territory 3 days ago. They have been hunting me ever since." "Why did you cross the border?" She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because my own clan tried to kill me when they found out I refused to participate in a raid on a human village. They said I was a traitor to my people. I ran, and the only direction I could go was south, into your lands. But the humans do not want me either. No one wants me. The raw pain in those last words made Jericho's chest tighten. He sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain some distance. I want you to stay, he said quietly. At least until you are healed enough to make a proper decision about where to go next. And if any patrols come here, I will tell them I have seen nothing. You can hide in the root cellar. It is well concealed. Henna turned to look at him, studying his face with an intensity that made him want to squirm. Why do you keep being kind to me? I am an orc. We killed humans during the war. Maybe I killed humans during the war. Did you? No. The answer was immediate and firm. I was too young. But others did. My father did. Does that not make you hate me? Jericho thought about it, really thought about it. My father died in the war too, he said finally. Killed by an orc raiding party. I hated your people for a long time after that. Maybe part of me still does. In the dark corners I do not like to examine too closely. But you are not your father and I am not mine. You are just Henna, and right now Henna needs help. So I am going to help you. She searched his eyes for deception or hidden motives and found none. Something in her expression shifted, the walls coming down just a fraction. Thank you, she whispered. You are welcome. Now I need to check your wounds and see how they are healing. The next week fell into a routine that surprised both of them with its domesticity. Every morning, Jericho would wake from his makeshift bed on the floor, though his back protested more each day, and check on Henna. He would change her bandages, bring her breakfast, and make sure she stayed off her injured ankle. Then he would go about his daily work on the farm while she rested. At first, Henna was silent and withdrawn, watching him with those wary amber eyes whenever he entered the room. But gradually, she began to relax. She started asking questions about his life, about the farm, about the world beyond her clan's territory. Jericho answered as honestly as he could, and eventually she began to share her own stories. She told him about growing up in the northern mountains, about the harsh winters and the constant struggle for resources that drove many orc clans to raid human settlements out of desperation, rather than malice. She told him about her mother, who had died giving birth to Henna's younger brother, about her father's grief transforming into anger that he channeled into hatred of humans. She told him about her brother, Garen, who she had not seen since fleeing the clan and worried for every day. He is only 15, she said one evening as Jericho brought her dinner. He tried to speak in my defense when the elders wanted me dead. Father struck him for it. I do not know what happened after I ran. He is your father's son. Your father will protect him, Jericho offered, though he could see the doubt in her eyes. My father follows the elders' will above all else, Henna replied bitterly. Tradition and clan loyalty are everything to him. I broke both when I refused to raid. Jericho did not know what to say to that, so he simply sat with her while she ate, his presence a quiet comfort. These evening conversations became his favorite part of the day. Henna had a sharp mind and a dry wit that caught him off guard. She made observations about human behavior that were astute and occasionally hilarious, and she had a talent for mimicking voices that had him laughing harder than he had in years. You do that very well, he said one night after she had perfectly imitated the pompous tone of the traveling merchant who sometimes stopped by the farm. Henna grinned, showing her small tusks. I used to entertain the children in our clan with stories and voices. It was one of the few things I was good at that did not involve fighting or hunting. You are good at many things, Jericho said without thinking. She gave him a strange look, something soft and uncertain flickering across her face. You truly believe that, do not you? You see me as a person, not just an orc. You are a person. That should not be a revelation. But it is, she said quietly. You have no idea how rare that is. By the 10th day, Henna's shoulder had healed enough that she could move her arm without wincing, and the swelling in her ankle had gone down significantly. She started insisting on getting out of bed, hobbling around the bedroom despite Jericho's protests. He finally relented and fashioned her a crutch from a sturdy branch so she could move about more safely. She explored the cabin with obvious curiosity, running her fingers over the simple furniture he had built, examining the herbs hanging from the ceiling beams to dry, studying the few books he owned with reverence. When she saw the main room and the pile of blankets near the fireplace where he had been sleeping, she stopped short. "You have been sleeping there this entire time?" she asked. "Yes, but I thought you would have another bed somewhere, or at least a proper bedroll." "I have one bed." "You are using it." Henna turned to stare at him, her mouth slightly open. "You gave me your only bed and have been sleeping on the floor for 10 days. The floor is not so bad once you get used to it," Jericho lied. "You can barely stand up straight," she pointed out, noticing how he stretched his back with a grimace. "Jericho, I cannot let you keep doing this. The bed is big enough for 2 people if we stay to opposite sides, or I can sleep on the floor. I am healed enough now." "Absolutely not." "You are still recovering." "So are you, from 10 nights of sleeping on hard wood like some kind of penitent monk." Henna's voice rose in frustration. "This is ridiculous. I am not some delicate flower who needs to be coddled." They argued about it for the better part of an hour until Henna finally retreated to the bedroom in a huff, and Jericho returned to his work outside, irritated and oddly touched by her concern. That night, he spread his blankets on the floor as usual and tried to find a comfortable position, knowing full well that none existed. He must have finally fallen asleep at some point, because he woke to the sensation of hands gripping his arm. His soldier's instincts kicked in and he jerked awake, reaching for a weapon that was not there. Henna loomed over him in the darkness, her green skin pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. "What is wrong?" he asked, fear spiking through him. "Are you hurt? Is someone coming?" "No," she said. "Nothing is wrong, but this is wrong." Before he could ask what she meant, she tugged on his arm with surprising strength, pulling him up from the floor. He stumbled to his feet, confused and still half asleep, as she maneuvered him toward the bedroom. When he realized her intention, he tried to dig in his heels. "Henna, no, we have been through this." "Yes, and I am ending it. You have shown me more kindness than anyone in my entire life. You took me in when I was bleeding and terrified. You fed me and healed me and protected me and asked for nothing in return. The absolute least I can do is let you sleep in your own bed." Her voice was fierce, brooking no argument. "I will not be the reason you break your back at 30. Now get in the bed." "I am 27, he protested weakly. "And you walk like you are 60 after sleeping on that floor. Move." She practically shoved him into the bedroom. Jericho found himself standing next to the bed, acutely aware of how small the space suddenly seemed with both of them in it. Henna gestured impatiently at the mattress. "I will stay on one side. You stay on the other. We will put a rolled blanket between us if that makes you feel more proper. But you are sleeping here tonight and every night after because I am tired of listening to you groan every time you stand up." Jericho wanted to argue further, but the bed looked impossibly inviting after so many nights on the floor, and Henna's expression made it clear she would not take no for an answer. He sighed in defeat and sat down on the far edge, keeping as much distance as possible. Henna limped around to the other side and climbed in, settling onto her back with her injured leg elevated on a pillow. The cabin fell silent except for the sound of their breathing and the distant cry of an owl outside. Jericho lay rigid, hyper-aware of every tiny movement, every soft exhale from the woman beside him. This was wildly inappropriate by any standard he had been raised with, sharing a bed with an unmarried woman he barely knew. Except he did know her, he realized. In the days she had spent recovering in his home, he had learned more about Henna Voss than he knew about most people he had grown up with. Jericho. Her voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, thank you for everything. I do not think I will ever be able to repay you. You do not need to repay kindness. That is not how it works. In my experience, everyone wants something eventually. He turned his head to look at her profile in the shadows. Then your experience has been with the wrong people. Henna turned too, and their eyes met across the small space between them. Something passed in that moment, a recognition that shifted the air itself. Jericho felt it like a physical force, this growing awareness of her not as an injured creature he was obligated to help, but as a woman he was starting to care for in ways that went beyond simple compassion. The realization terrified him. He rolled onto his other side, putting his back to her. We should sleep. Morning comes early. There was a pause, then a quiet, "Good night, Jericho." "Good night, Henna." Despite his fears about the impropriety of the situation, Jericho slept better that night than he had in weeks. The bed was infinitely more comfortable than the floor, yes, but it was more than that. There was something deeply soothing about the quiet presence beside him, the soft sound of another person breathing in the darkness. For the first time since mustering out of the army and coming to this isolated farm, he did not feel quite so alone. The days that followed brought a shift in their relationship that neither acknowledged aloud, but both felt keenly. Henna grew strong enough to help with small tasks around the farm, insisting on earning her keep despite Jericho's protests. She had a natural way with the chickens, and they seemed less skittish with her than they did with him. She helped prepare meals, and he discovered she had a talent for cooking that far exceeded his own basic abilities. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side, talking and laughing and occasionally bickering over trivial things like whether the tomatoes needed more water or if the fence around the vegetable garden was sturdy enough. To anyone watching from outside, they might have looked like an old married couple rather than a human and an orc who had met less than 3 weeks ago under the most dire circumstances. But the growing attraction between them became harder to ignore. Jericho caught himself watching Henna when she did not notice, admiring the graceful strength in the way she moved now that her injuries had healed, the way sunlight brought out golden flecks in her amber eyes. He noticed small details, the particular way she tucked her dark hair behind her pointed ears when concentrating, the genuine warmth in her laugh when something struck her as funny, the fierce protectiveness in her expression when a fox prowled too close to the chicken coop. He also noticed that she watched him too, though she was better at hiding it. Sometimes he would turn and catch her quickly looking away, a faint flush darkening her green cheeks. When they worked together on a task, their hands would occasionally brush, and the contact felt electric, both of them jerking back like they had been burned. At night, they maintained their careful distance in the bed, the invisible line between them as solid as any wall. But Jericho found himself lying awake, listening to her breathe, fighting the urge to reach across that space and touch her hand. He did not know when protecting her had become something more, when concern had deepened into affection and affection into something that felt dangerously like love. It was dangerous because it could never work. Even if Henna felt the same way, which he had no reason to believe she did, what future could they have? An orc and a human together would be accepted by neither of their peoples. She would eventually have to leave, to find somewhere she could build a life without looking over her shoulder for patrols or assassins from her former clan. That was the reality, and he needed to accept it. The problem was his heart had stopped listening to reality. The crisis came on a clear morning 3 weeks after Henna had first stumbled into his barn. Jericho had gone into the nearby town to sell eggs and buy supplies, leaving Henna at the farm with strict instructions to stay hidden in case anyone came by. He made the trip as quickly as possible, uneasy about leaving her alone despite her assurances that she could defend herself now that her injuries had healed. He was loading his wagon with flour and salt when he overheard a conversation between 2 men near the tavern. "They are increasing patrols along the northern border," one said. "Apparently, they are still looking for that orc woman who crossed over last month. Word is she killed a border guard and stole his weapon." Jericho froze, his hand clenching on the bag of flour. "I heard she was part of a scouting party for a larger invasion," the second man replied. "Captain Morris is offering a reward for information about her whereabouts. 10 silver coins for anyone who spots her." 10 silver. For one orc. Must be important if they want her that badly. Jericho forced himself to finish loading the wagon calmly, though his mind raced. He had known Henna was being hunted, but he had not realized the extent of it, or that there were lies being spread about her. She had not killed anyone or stolen anything. She had been fleeing for her life. He drove the wagon home faster than was wise, his heart pounding. When he reached the farm, Henna was hanging laundry behind the cabin, and the sight of her safe and whole made relief wash through him so powerfully his knees went weak. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately, reading his expression. What happened? He told her everything he had overheard. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin a pale olive shade. 10 silver, she repeated numbly. "That is more than most farmers make in a year. Jericho, you could turn me in and live comfortably for months." "Is that what you think I would do?" The words came out sharper than he intended. "No," she looked stricken. "No, I know you would not. I am sorry. I just meant others will be looking now. Every person in need of money will be watching for me. I have to leave, today, right now. And go where?" Jericho demanded. "You have no supplies, no plan, nowhere safe to run. They are patrolling the border. You would not make it a mile before someone spotted you. So what do you suggest? That I stay here and wait until someone comes asking questions? Until they search your property and find me?" Henna's voice rose with each word, panic edging in. "They will kill you for harboring me, Jericho. They will burn everything you have worked for. I cannot let that happen. And I cannot let you walk out there alone with half the territory looking for you." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the argument charged with all the unspoken feelings that had been building for weeks. Henna's eyes shone with unshed tears, and Jericho realized with a jolt that she was not just afraid for herself but for him. "Why do you even care what happens to me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I am nothing to you, just an orc who showed up bleeding on your property. You have done more than enough, more than anyone could expect. Just let me go. Because you are not nothing to me." The confession burst out of him before he could stop it. "You are everything to me, Henna. Somewhere in the last 3 weeks, you became the most important person in my world, and I do not know how to let you walk away." The silence that followed was deafening. Henna stared at him with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open in shock. Jericho felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he had not since the war, but he could not take the words back, did not want to. "You truly mean that," she whispered, and it was not a question. "Yes." She crossed the space between them in 3 quick strides and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or testing. It was fierce and desperate, her hands gripping the front of his shirt, his arms coming up to wrap around her waist and pull her closer. She tasted like honey from the tea she had been drinking, and she kissed like a woman who had been holding back too long. Jericho fell into it gladly, pouring all his unspoken feelings into the contact, every fear and hope and desperate wish. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Henna pressed her forehead against his chest. "I love you too," she said, the words muffled against his shirt. "I have been trying so hard not to because I knew I would have to leave. But I love you, Jericho Pierce, and it is the most terrifying thing I have ever felt." He tipped her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "Then do not leave. Stay here with me. We will find a way to make this work." "How?" Practical even in the midst of emotional upheaval, Henna pulled back slightly. "Even if the patrols give up searching eventually, your neighbors will know. Someone will see me. And even if humans accept us, which they will not, my people will consider me an even greater traitor. There is no future where this ends well. There is a future where we are together. That is the only part that matters. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. I love you, you love me. Everything else we can figure out." Henna laughed, though tears now ran freely down her cheeks. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Can it not be both?" She kissed him again, softer this time, tender instead of desperate. When she pulled away, determination had replaced the fear in her expression. "All right, we stay together, but we need a real plan. If the patrols come here, we need to be ready." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jericho cleaned out the root cellar, making sure Henna would have enough room to hide comfortably if needed. They discussed a signal system so he could warn her if anyone approached. They inventoried supplies and made plans for what to do if fleeing became necessary. That night, there was no invisible line between them in the bed. Henna curled against Jericho's side, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. It felt right in a way he could not articulate, like a piece of himself he had not known was missing had finally clicked into place. "Tell me about the future you see," Henna murmured into the darkness. "The one where we are together." Jericho thought about it, letting himself imagine possibilities he had not dared consider before. "I see us working this farm together, making it prosper. Maybe building a bigger cabin, one with enough room for a family someday. I see years of quiet mornings and peaceful nights. I see growing old beside you." "That sounds impossibly beautiful," she said quietly. "Do you really think we can have that?" "I think we can try, and I think trying is worth it." They drifted to sleep wrapped in each other's arms and dreams of a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. The knock on the door came 2 days later, just after dawn. Jericho was outside feeding the chickens when he heard the sound of horses approaching. His blood turned to ice. He sprinted for the cabin, throwing open the door to find Henna already moving toward the root cellar entrance hidden beneath a rug in the corner. "Go," he urged. "Do not make a sound." She paused just before descending the ladder, turning to look at him with fear and love mingled in her eyes. "Be careful. Always." He closed the cellar door and repositioned the rug, then took a moment to compose himself before answering the knock that came again, more insistent this time. When he opened the door, he found himself facing 3 men in the uniform of the Border Patrol. The one in front, apparently the leader, had cold blue eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. "Good morning," the man said, though his tone held no warmth. "I am Captain Morris. We are searching for a fugitive orc woman who crossed the border several weeks ago. Have you seen anything unusual in the area?" Jericho kept his expression neutral, channeling every ounce of his military training to remain calm. "Nothing unusual, sir, just the normal wildlife. What did this orc do?" That is official business. We have been authorized to search properties in the area for signs of her presence. Morris gestured to his companions. You do not mind if we take a look around, do you? It was not really a question. Jericho stepped aside, his heart hammering. Of course not. I have nothing to hide. The soldiers moved through the cabin with brutal efficiency, overturning furniture, opening cabinets, checking every corner. Jericho stood in the doorway and watched, praying that Henna stayed silent, that the root cellar door remained concealed. One of the soldiers paused near the rug, and Jericho's breath caught. Sir, the soldier called. There is something here. Captain Morris walked over and knelt, pulling back the rug to reveal the cellar door. Jericho's mind raced, trying to think of an explanation, a distraction, anything that would stop what was about to happen. But he came up empty, frozen in horror as Morris lifted the door. The cellar below was dark and still. Morris called down, anyone there? When no answer came, he gestured for one of his men to bring a torch. The soldier descended with the light held high, and Jericho waited for the shout that would signal disaster. Instead, the soldier climbed back up, shaking his head. Just food stores, sir. No one down there. Morris looked frustrated but not particularly surprised. He stood and dusted off his knees. Very well. If you see anything suspicious, you are required to report it immediately. The penalty for harboring an enemy is severe. I understand, Jericho managed through his tight throat. The soldiers left, and Jericho waited until the sound of their horses faded before rushing to the cellar door. He pulled it open to find the space exactly as the soldier had described, just shelves of preserved food and barrels of supplies. No Henna. Panic seized him. Had she fled during the search? Had she been there and the soldier somehow missed her? He was about to start searching the property when he heard a soft sound from outside. He ran to the back of the cabin and nearly collapsed with relief. Henna crouched behind the woodpile, pressed into the shadows. When she saw him, she stumbled forward and he caught her, holding her tight while she shook. I heard them coming before you did, she explained breathlessly. I knew I would never make it to the cellar in time, so I went out the window and hid. I am sorry, I should have told you the plan, but there was no time. You are safe. That is all that matters. He cupped her face in his hands, searching her eyes. But this proves they are serious about finding you. We cannot keep living like this, waiting for the next knock on the door. I know. Henna pulled away from him reluctantly. Which is why I have to leave, tonight. Absolutely not. We stay together, remember, Jericho, be reasonable. They are searching houses now. How long before they come back with dogs to track scent? How long before a neighbor gets suspicious? She gripped his hands desperately. I cannot live with your death on my conscience. I would rather spend the rest of my life running than see you hang for protecting me. He wanted to argue, to insist they could find another way, but the fear in her eyes stopped him. She was right about the danger, about the impossibility of hiding indefinitely. But letting her go alone felt like carving out a piece of his own heart. Then we leave together, he said firmly. Tonight, both of us. And abandon your farm, your home, everything you have built. A home means nothing without you in it. Henna's face crumpled. You cannot give up your entire life for me. Watch me. They spent the day preparing in a controlled frenzy. Jericho sold what he could not carry to a neighboring farmer, claiming a sick relative needed him back east. It was not much, but it would give them traveling money. He packed supplies for a long journey, choosing carefully what to bring and what to leave behind. Each item he discarded felt like cutting a tether to his old life, but he did not hesitate. As the sun set, they loaded their packs and took one last look at the little cabin that had become their sanctuary. Henna had tears streaming down her face, and Jericho felt an answering ache in his own chest. This place had meant something to him once. He had poured his sweat and hope into building it. But looking at Henna, he knew he would make the same choice 1,000 times over. They were about to head out when the sound of approaching horses froze them both. Not the patrol this time, but a single rider coming fast. Jericho pushed Henna behind him, reaching for the knife at his belt. The rider burst into the clearing, and Jericho's hand fell away in shock. The rider was young, barely more than a boy, with green skin and small tusks. An orc. He practically fell off his horse in his haste to dismount, and when he looked up, Henna gasped. "Garin." "Henna." The young orc stumbled forward, and Henna ran to meet him, pulling him into a crushing embrace. "I have been searching for you for weeks. I was so afraid I would not find you in time." "In time for what? What has happened?" Henna held her brother at arm's length, examining him for injuries. Garin was breathless, his words tumbling over each other. "Everything has changed. Father is dead. He challenged the elder who ordered your execution, claimed the order was unjust. He lost the fight, but his challenge started something. Others began questioning the elder's absolute authority. There was a split in the clan, those who wanted peace with humans and those who wanted to continue raiding. I am part of a new clan now, one dedicated to finding a different way." Henna looked stunned. "Father is dead. He died honorably, defending you. His last words were that he had been wrong to value tradition over his children." Garin gripped her shoulders. "Henna, you can come home. The new clan has no death sentence on you. We need people like you, people who believe there can be peace between our peoples." For a long moment, Henna said nothing. Jericho watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly to name. Relief that her brother was safe. Grief for her father. Hope at the possibility of belonging somewhere again. But then her expression settled into something clear and certain. "I have a home," she said, reaching back to take Jericho's hand. "And a family. Right here." Garin's eyes widened as he noticed Jericho for the first time, really noticed him. He looked between them, taking in their joined hands the way they stood together. Slowly, understanding dawned. "You are with a human," Garin said carefully. "Romantically." "Yes." Henna's voice was steady. "I love him, and before you say anything, he is the reason I am alive. He took me in when I was dying, protected me when soldiers came looking, and was willing to give up everything to keep me safe. He is a better person than most orcs I have known." Jericho felt his face heat at the praise but said nothing. This was Henna's moment, her choice to make. Garin studied him with the intense scrutiny only a younger brother could muster, and Jericho met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away or show uncertainty. Finally, Garin's serious expression broke into a grin. "Then he is welcome in our clan as well, both of you. The whole point of our new way is to build bridges between humans and orcs. What better bridge than a couple who chose each other, despite everything trying to keep them apart?" The words hung in the air like a promise. Henna turned to look at Jericho, question and hope shining in her eyes. "What do you think? A new clan of orcs and humans trying to build peace together. It would not be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Jericho replied, "but I would follow you anywhere." She smiled, bright and beautiful, and kissed him in front of her brother, who made an exaggerated sound of disgust that made them both laugh. When they broke apart, Henna looked more at peace than Jericho had ever seen her. "We should leave tonight," Garin urged. "The patrols are still searching, and traveling will be safer in the dark. Our clan's territory is 3 days north. Beyond the border in lands the humans do not actively patrol." They packed quickly, taking what they had already prepared and leaving the rest. As they mounted up, Jericho took one last look at the cabin that had been his refuge after the war, the place where he had planned to live out his days in quiet isolation. He felt no regret. That lonely existence seemed impossibly distant now, like a different life entirely. They rode through the night, Garin leading the way along paths that avoided settlements and patrol routes. As dawn broke on the second day, they paused to rest near a stream. Henna sat beside Jericho, her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "You have been quiet." "I am thinking about my father," she admitted. "I hated him for turning on me, but in the end he tried to make it right. I wish I could have told him I understood, that I forgave him." "I think he knew," Jericho said. "Why else would he have challenged the elder? He was trying to give you what he could not in life, a chance at a future." "He would never have approved of us," Henna said with a sad smile. "A human and an orc together. It would have seemed like a betrayal of everything he believed in. Maybe. Or maybe he would have surprised you. People can change." Henna turned to look at him, her amber eyes searching his face. "You really believe that, do not you? That people can be better than their worst impulses, that peace is possible?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what are we fighting for?" She kissed him, slow and sweet, a promise and a prayer. When they finally pulled apart, Garin was making pointed throat-clearing sounds from where he tended the horses, and they both laughed. They reached the new clan's territory on the evening of the third day. What Jericho saw surprised him. The settlement was not the rough war camp he had expected, but a genuine community. Orcs and a handful of humans worked side by side, building homes, tending crops, and practicing combat drills. Children, both orc and human, played together near the central fire. It looked like hope made manifest. A female orc approached them, older than Henna but with the same proud bearing. She embraced Garin warmly, then turned her attention to Henna and Jericho. "So you are the sister Garin has been searching for, and the human who protected her. You are both welcome here. I am Thora Ironwood, one of the clan leaders." Henna introduced herself and Jericho, explaining their situation. Thora listened with keen interest, her expression thoughtful. A human soldier who chose compassion over hate, and an orc woman brave enough to defy her clan for peace. "You two represent everything we are trying to build here. We would be honored if you chose to stay." "We would be honored to stay," Henna replied, and Jericho nodded his agreement. They were given a small dwelling on the edge of the settlement, nothing fancy but serviceable. As they unpacked their meager belongings that evening, Jericho found himself marveling at the turn his life had taken. A month ago, he had been alone, isolated, slowly calcifying into a bitter old man at 27. Now he stood in an orc settlement with the woman he loved, about to build a life that would have been unthinkable in the world he had grown up in. "What are you thinking?" Henna asked, coming to stand beside him in the doorway as they watched the sun set over their new home. "That this is terrifying and exciting and completely insane," he answered honestly, "and that I would not change a single moment that led us here." She leaned into him, and he pulled her close. "I was so certain I would die that night in your barn," she said quietly. "I had accepted it. And then you gave me your hand instead of a knife. You gave me food and shelter and safety. You gave me your bed and slept on the floor because you thought I needed it more. You gave me everything without asking for anything in return. You gave me a reason to be something more than a broken soldier hiding from the world," Jericho countered. "You reminded me that choosing kindness is not weakness, that there is still good worth fighting for." "We saved each other," Henna said simply. "Yes, we did." They stood together in the doorway as twilight deepened, watching their new community settle in for the night. Somewhere, a mother called her children home. Somewhere, friends laughed over a shared meal. Somewhere, hope persisted against all odds. In the months that followed, Jericho and Henna worked tirelessly to help the new clan grow and prosper. Jericho's farming knowledge proved invaluable, and he helped establish efficient crop rotation systems. Henna became a bridge between the human and orc members of the clan, her ability to see both perspectives making her a natural mediator when conflicts arose. They were wed in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions, exchanging vows in front of the entire community. Garen stood up for Henna, and Thora herself officiated. It was simple and joyful and perfect. Their dwelling expanded as they built additions with their own hands, planning for the future they now dared to imagine. On quiet evenings, they would sit together and talk about the garden they would plant next spring, the livestock they might raise, the children they hoped to have someday. Children who would grow up in a world where love between different peoples was not forbidden but celebrated. 2 years after that desperate night when Henna had stumbled bleeding into his barn, Jericho stood in that same rebuilt barn, now part of the clan's communal property, and watched his wife teach a group of mixed human and orc children how to care for chickens. She caught his eye and smiled, that same brilliant smile that had first made him realize he was falling in love with her, and his heart swelled with gratitude for the choices that had led them to this moment. A young human boy approached him shyly. "Mr. Pierce, is it true you were a soldier in the war?" "Yes," Jericho confirmed. "And you fought against orcs?" "I did." The boy looked confused. "But now you are married to one, and you live with us. How did that happen?" Jericho thought about how to answer, how to distill everything he had learned into something a child could understand. Finally, he knelt down to the boy's level. "I learned that who we fight does not have to define who we become, that even in the darkest moments, there is always a choice to be kind. And that love is stronger than hate, even when hate seems easier." The boy nodded solemnly, processing this. Then he grinned. "I am glad you chose to be kind. Miss Henna makes the best bread, and she would not be here if you had not helped her." Jericho laughed. "That is very true and practical. I like the way you think." As the boy ran off to join the other children, Henna came to stand beside Jericho. "What was that about?" "Just teaching the next generation," he replied, pulling her close. "That kindness matters, that choices matter, that there is always hope for something better." She kissed his cheek. "Look at you becoming wise in your old age. I am 29. Practically ancient." He chased her out of the barn, both of them laughing like the children around them, and it felt like coming home in a way his isolated cabin never had. This was belonging. This was purpose. This was love in its truest form, choosing each other every single day despite a world that said they should not. And on quiet nights when they lay together in the bed they now shared without hesitation or propriety, Henna would sometimes trace the scar on his shoulder from an old war wound and marvel at how much had changed. Jericho would kiss her forehead and hold her close, and thank whatever force in the universe had guided a terrified orc girl to his barn on that desperate night. He had given her his bed and slept on the floor because it was the right thing to do. She had pulled him up because she could not bear to see him suffer for her sake. And in those simple acts of mutual care, they had built something neither had thought possible. A love that transcended everything meant to divide them, a future bright with promise, and a family that proved peace between their peoples was not just a dream but a living, breathing reality. They were home,